My name is Evelyn Marlowe, and I'll never forget the morning I realized my entire life savings had vanished. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, the same one my late husband and I had bought decades ago when we first married. The sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, and for a brief moment, everything felt as it always had: quiet, ordinary, safe. I sipped my coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account, expecting to see the comfortable nest egg I had built over 40 years of teaching and saving. But instead, the number on the screen made my heart stop. Zero. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the page, my hands trembling so hard that I nearly spilled coffee onto the keyboard. I checked my other accounts: savings, retirement fund, everything. All drained. My throat tightened as panic rose in my chest like a tidal wave. I grabbed my phone and called the bank immediately. My voice shook as I asked the customer service representative to explain what had happened. "Mrs. Marlowe," the woman on the line said gently, "the withdrawals were made using authorized access. It appears someone linked your account to joint transfers." "Authorized," I croaked. "By who?" She read out the name, and my stomach dropped. It was Claire, my daughter-in-law. Claire, the polished, picture-perfect wife of my only son Daniel. The one who had always smiled sweetly at me but spoke to me like I was a fragile antique she couldn't wait to store away. I felt the room tilt. There had to be a mistake. Claire wouldn't do this to me. She couldn't. But as I scrolled through the transaction history, the proof was right there: thousands upon thousands of dollars funneled out over the past 3 months. Shopping sprees, luxury vacations, spa retreats, all paid for with the money I had worked decades to save. My vision blurred with tears. I called Daniel, desperate to hear him say it wasn't true. "Daniel," I whispered when he answered, "do you know anything about my savings account?" It's empty." There was a long pause on the other end. "Mom," he finally said, his voice tight, "Claire told me you gave her permission. She said you wanted to help us get settled with the new house and everything. You said it was a gift." "A gift," I gasped. "Daniel, I never—" But he cut me off. "Mom, we needed the money. You don't need it the way we do. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder?" The words sliced through me like a knife. My own son, my sweet boy, who I had raised alone after his father died, was standing on his wife's side. He believed her. That night, I sat in my living room staring at the cold, empty bank statements spread across my coffee table. The house was too quiet, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I thought of all the times I had sacrificed for Daniel, how I had skipped vacations, clipped coupons, worked overtime so he could go to college, so he could have a better life. And now, this was my reward. For a moment, I felt completely hollow. Maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't need the money. Maybe I was just an old woman clinging to numbers in a bank account that didn't matter anymore. But then, as the clock ticked past midnight, something inside me shifted. No, this wasn't about money. It was about betrayal, about respect, about the simple decency I had always shown my family, only to have it thrown back in my face. I wiped my tears, straightened the papers in front of me, and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. They thought I would cry quietly and fade into the background. But I wasn't done yet. I decided that night that I wouldn't confront them, not yet. Revenge, I realized, didn't need anger or noise. It needed patience. And if Claire wanted my money so badly, she was about to find out exactly what it felt like to live with the consequences of her greed. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. My savings were gone, yes, but so was any illusion I had left about Claire or even Daniel. That hurt more than losing the money itself. I had raised my son to be kind, to be fair, to value honesty above all else. Yet here he was, siding with his wife without so much as asking for my side of the story. I went through the motions of my morning, brushed my hair, watered the plants, made myself tea, but everything felt mechanical, like I was living in someone else's body. Every now and then, I'd catch myself glancing at the framed photo on my mantel, Daniel's wedding day. Claire, radiant in white, holding his arm like she owned the world. I had been so proud that day. But as I looked at the photo now, something in Claire's smile seemed different, sharper, smugger. Maybe it had always been there, and I had just refused to see it. Later that day, I called Daniel again. Maybe he'd had time to think things through. Maybe he'd realize how wrong this was. Daniel, I said softly when he answered. I need to understand. Did you really believe I'd give away everything I saved without even talking to you about it? He sighed heavily the way he used to as a teenager when I told him to clean his room. Mom Claire told me you wanted us to be secure. You're retired. You don't need that much money. You have the house. You're fine. Fine. My voice cracked. Daniel, that money was my life's work. Do you know how many nights I stayed up grading papers just to make ends meet? How many things I gave up so you could have what you needed? Mom, he snapped, don't make me feel guilty for building my own life. Claire's been stressed about finances. This is what's best for our family. Our family. Like I wasn't part of it anymore. I hung up without saying goodbye. My hand trembled as I placed the phone down, but my heart was oddly steady. Something inside me had hardened, crystallized into something unbreakable. That night, I sat down with a notebook and began writing everything I knew about Claire and her spending habits. The fancy boutiques she loved, the expensive restaurants she posted about on social media, the weekend trips she bragged about to her friends. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about power. Claire thought she had won. She thought I was weak, easy to manipulate, just another old woman too soft to fight back. But she had no idea that I had quietly spent my retirement learning things most people my age ignored: how online banking worked, how to track digital transactions, even a bit about legal processes. People always underestimated me, but that was about to change. The following week, I called an old friend, Michael Turner, who had worked at the bank for decades before retiring. Evelyn, he said warmly when he picked up. It's been ages. What's going on? I need a favor, I told him. My voice didn't shake this time. I think my daughter-in-law stole everything I've ever saved. And I want proof. There was silence for a moment. Then Michael spoke, his tone serious. Come by tomorrow morning. Bring whatever records you have. We'll find out exactly what she did. I thanked him, a small flicker of hope lighting inside me. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because I had my money back, no, that was still gone, but because I had a plan. Claire thought she had taken everything from me. She hadn't realized that when you rob someone who has nothing left to lose, they become dangerous. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not for vanity, but for purpose. A soft navy sweater, my pearl earrings, and the leather handbag I'd bought decades ago and cared for meticulously. I needed to look like the woman I truly was, calm, collected, and far stronger than anyone gave me credit for. When I arrived at Michael Turner's home, he greeted me with the same warm smile I remembered from the bank years ago. We sat at his kitchen table, papers spread out between us. I handed him every statement I had printed the night I discovered the empty accounts. His brows furrowed as he scanned through the pages. Evelyn, this wasn't just reckless spending. These were deliberate transfers linked to new accounts under Claire's name. My stomach twisted. Can we trace them? Michael nodded slowly. Yes. The trail isn't hard to follow. But the bigger problem is that some of these transfers were set up with your digital authorization. That means she had your login credentials. I sat back stunned. Claire must have gotten into my computer maybe when she helped me check my email months ago. I had trusted her like family, and she had used that trust to strip me of everything. Michael looked up at me, his expression firm. Evelyn, this isn't just unethical. It's illegal. If you want to pursue this, I can put you in touch with the right attorney. But you need to be prepared. Your son might not side with you. The words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to believe Daniel would come to his senses once he saw the truth. But deep down, I already knew Claire had her claws in him too deeply. I'm prepared, I said quietly. That afternoon, Michael connected me with a lawyer named Rebecca Hale. She was sharp, efficient, and didn't once treat me like a fragile old lady. She listened carefully as I explained everything, flipping through the evidence with a focused expression. Mrs. Marlowe, she said when I finished, we can absolutely build a case. But I want to be clear, if we move forward, things will get ugly. Your son will feel betrayed, even though you're the one who's been wronged. Are you ready for that? I thought of all the nights I had stayed awake worrying about Daniel as a boy, all the sacrifices I had made so he could have a better life. Yes, I said, my voice steady, because if I stay silent, they'll think this is acceptable. And it isn't. Rebecca gave me a small smile. Good. Then we'll start by freezing any remaining assets under your name. We'll track Claire's new accounts and build a paper trail. If she used your identity for these transfers, she's in serious legal trouble. I left her office that day with a folder full of documents and a strange sense of power I hadn't felt in years. But when I got home, that feeling faded as soon as I saw my son's name flashing on my phone screen. "Mom, we need to talk," Daniel said curtly when I answered. "About what?" I asked, already bracing myself. "Claire told me you're threatening to take her to court." "Please tell me that's not true." I stayed silent for a moment before answering. "Daniel, she stole my life savings? What would you do if someone took everything you worked for?" He exhaled sharply. "Mom, you're overreacting. Claire needed help. You're not going to ruin her life over this. We're family." I almost laughed at the hypocrisy of it, family. That word had been so easy for them to use when they wanted my money, but meaningless when it came to respecting me. "Daniel," I said, my voice like steel. "Claire already ruined her own life. I'm just making sure she takes responsibility for it." He hung up without another word. I set my phone down, my hands steady this time. Claire thought she had won, but she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, assuming I was too weak to fight back. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Daniel didn't call again, and Claire stayed silent too. But silence didn't mean nothing was happening behind the scenes. Rebecca and Michael were working relentlessly, tracing every transfer and every unauthorized login. One evening, Rebecca called me with news. "We've confirmed that Claire accessed your account using your personal information. She transferred nearly every dollar into an account solely under her name. With this evidence, we can prove financial abuse and identity theft." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. "So what happens next?" "We'll file motions to freeze her accounts and initiate a civil suit. If she tries to move the money, it will trigger immediate legal action." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground. But I didn't want to confront Claire, not yet. Revenge, I knew, needed time to ripen. It wasn't just about winning in court. It was about letting her believe she had gotten away with it just long enough for the blow to feel devastating when it landed. So I called Daniel one afternoon. "Daniel," I said gently when he answered, "I've been thinking about everything. Maybe I was too harsh. I don't want us to fight." His tone softened immediately. "Mom, I'm glad you feel that way. Claire said you'd come around. She's been really upset. She thought you hated her." I forced a small laugh. No, I don't hate her. I just needed time to process. "Tell her I'm not angry. She can stop worrying." There was a pause. Then Daniel chuckled in relief. "I knew you'd understand." "Thanks, Mom." When we hung up, I sat back in my chair, a bitter smile creeping across my face. Let them think I had forgiven them. Let them feel safe. The next few weeks played out like a charade. I even accepted an invitation to dinner at their new house. Claire greeted me with a falsely sweet smile, her eyes sparkling with triumph. "Evelyn," she said, kissing my cheek, "I'm so glad you could come. We're finally settled in thanks to your generosity." "Of course, dear," I replied softly. "Family helps family, right?" She laughed, completely oblivious to the storm gathering around her. At dinner, Claire boasted about the renovations she had planned: the new pool, the designer kitchen. I nodded politely, each word she spoke only fueling the fire inside me. What Claire didn't know was that Rebecca had already filed all the necessary motions. Her accounts were in the process of being frozen. The bank had flagged her transfers for investigation, and legal action was quietly moving forward like a predator stalking its prey. Every smile I gave her that night was a mask. Every bite of food I took felt like part of a ritual, one final performance before the curtain fell on her perfect little life. When I left their house that night, Claire hugged me like nothing had ever happened. "Thank you for understanding, Evelyn," she whispered. I smiled softly, leaning close enough for only her to hear. "Don't thank me yet, dear. We're just getting started." She frowned, slightly confused, but before she could ask, I kissed her cheek and walked out the door. The trap was set. All that was left was to wait for it to spring shut. A week later, Rebecca called me with a tone of satisfaction in her voice. "Evelyn, it's done. The court approved our motion. Claire's accounts are officially frozen. She won't be able to withdraw a single cent. I exhaled slowly, my lips curling into a smile. And Daniel? He'll find out soon enough, she replied. The bank will notify both of them about the investigation. It won't take long for the panic to start. 2 days later, I got my first sign that the trap had worked. My phone buzzed repeatedly, calls from Daniel, texts full of desperate messages. Mom, what did you do? Claire's accounts are frozen. We can't pay the mortgage. Please answer me. We need to talk. This is insane. Fix this. Now. I didn't reply. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch. The golden light of sunset painting the world in warm colors. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The next morning, however, Daniel showed up at my door. He didn't knock politely, he banged on it like a police officer. I opened the door calmly. Mom, he said, his face flushed with anger. What did you do? Claire is losing her mind. They're saying you've taken legal action against her. I met his gaze without flinching. Because I have Daniel. She stole from me. And now she's facing the consequences. His mouth opened and closed like he couldn't find the words. She's your family, he finally shouted. So am I said softly. But that didn't matter when she emptied my life savings, did it? Daniel stared at me, stunned. I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, the first crack in his blind loyalty to Claire. But then as quickly as it came, it was gone. You're ruining everything, he spat. I stepped aside and gestured toward the street. No, Danielle. Claire ruined everything the moment she betrayed me. I'm just making sure she answers for it. He stormed off without another word, slamming his car door and speeding away. That night, Rebecca called again. Claire's panicking. Her lawyer reached out, but she doesn't have a case. The evidence is airtight. We'll recover the majority of your savings, but we can also hold her personally liable for the rest. She'll be in debt for years. A calm satisfaction spread through me. But I wasn't done. I wanted Claire to feel the weight of her own actions, not just financially, but socially. She thrived on appearances, on being admired by her friends. Losing money was one thing. Losing her image of perfection would be another. So I stayed silent. I let her unravel, let her desperation show. It wasn't long before the whispers started. Friends she had bragged to about her beautiful life now avoided her. Neighbors who once envied her designer bags and luxury vacations looked at her with pity or, worse, disdain. Claire's smile, once so smug, began to falter. And I simply watched, knowing that sometimes revenge didn't require fire or fury. Sometimes it just required patience. 2 weeks later, I received an email from Rebecca with the subject line, "The final evidence." Inside were PDF attachments, bank statements, screenshots of login attempts, and a timeline of every transfer Claire had made. Seeing it all laid out so clearly was like looking at a map of betrayal. Claire hadn't just stolen from me. She had planned it step by step for months. Rebecca called soon after. Evelyn, with this evidence, she has no defense. We'll not only recover your funds, but we can also file charges for identity theft. If she fights us, she risks criminal prosecution. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. So she'll have to choose between paying me back or facing jail time. Exactly. It felt surreal. For weeks, Claire had paraded around as if she had outsmarted me while I quietly built a case strong enough to crush her entire facade. That weekend, Daniel called again. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't slept. Mom, Claire's terrified. She says you're trying to destroy her. I paused before answering. She destroyed herself, Daniel. I just stopped letting her get away with it. You don't understand, he said desperately. She only did it because she thought we'd never have enough. We needed that money. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Needed it. For spa trips and luxury handbags. Daniel, I raised you better than this. He didn't reply. For a moment, I heard only his uneven breathing. Please, he finally said, his voice breaking, don't do this. My heart ached hearing him so defeated. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about teaching him and Claire that actions have consequences. I can't undo what's already been done, I said gently. But maybe this will finally teach you both what real responsibility looks like. The following Monday, Claire received the official notice from the court. Rebecca forwarded me the email her lawyer had sent in response, full of excuses begging for leniency. I smiled. The woman who had once strutted through life like she owned the world was now cornered, exposed, stripped of the power she'd stolen from me. And it wasn't just about money anymore. Her friends stopped calling. Her perfect Instagram life vanished overnight. One evening, as I walked through town, I saw Claire across the street. She wasn't in designer clothes anymore, just plain jeans and a sweater. She looked ordinary. For a moment our eyes met. She looked away first. That was when I realized revenge didn't always need to be loud. Sometimes the quiet kind, the kind that slowly erodes a person's pride, was the most satisfying of all. The legal process moved quickly after that. Rebecca was relentless. She filed every document with precision, ensuring Claire had no loophole to escape through. A month later, Claire and Daniel were summoned to a hearing. I didn't tell them I would be there. When I entered the courtroom, Claire's head snapped up. For the first time, she didn't greet me with that smug smile. She looked pale, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her lawyer's arm. Daniel glanced at me too, but there was no anger in his eyes this time. Only shame. The judge reviewed the evidence calmly, piece by piece. Every unauthorized transfer, every forged authorization, every frivolous purchase. By the end, Claire looked like she might faint. The ruling was swift. Claire was ordered to return the stolen funds and assume personal liability for the debt incurred from her lavish spending. The court also approved damages for identity theft, effectively burying her in legal and financial consequences for years to come. Rebecca leaned toward me and whispered, "This is the best possible outcome. She'll pay for every cent and then some." I nodded, but I didn't smile. Not yet. After the hearing, Claire approached me in the hallway. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking. "Evelyn, please. I made a mistake. Can't we just forget this happened?" I looked at her for a long moment, studying the woman who had pretended to love me while quietly betraying me. "No, Claire," I said softly but firmly. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And now you're living with it." She opened her mouth to speak again, but I turned and walked away. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine and sat by the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't even triumph. It was peace. For the first time in months, I finally felt like myself again. Not the weak, helpless woman Claire thought she had defeated, but the Evelyn Marlowe who had spent decades quietly surviving, quietly enduring, and now, quietly, winning. Still, I wasn't done yet. Money and legal victories were one thing, but poetic justice, that would come next. Poetic justice, I realized, wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about letting Claire face the life she had built with her own hands. Rebecca and I had already discussed the next steps. Using the legal leverage we had gained, I quietly transferred my remaining assets, my home, my small investments, into a trust that excluded Daniel and Claire entirely. If they thought they could wait me out and inherit what was left, they were wrong. I visited Rebecca's office to finalize the papers. As I signed the documents, a strange calm washed over me. My signature felt like the final act of reclaiming my life. "Are you sure you don't want to leave anything to your son?" Rebecca asked gently. I paused for a moment. Daniel was my only child. I had loved him more than life itself. But love didn't mean blindness. "I'll make provisions for him later if he earns it," I said finally. "For now, this is about protecting myself." Rebecca nodded. "You're doing the right thing." That evening, Daniel showed up at my house again. But this time he didn't barge in. He stood at the door, hands in his pockets, looking like a boy again. "Mom," he said quietly when I opened the door. I don't know what to say." I studied him for a long moment. "Then don't say anything. Just think about the choices you made and who you chose to stand by." He looked down ashamed. "I thought Claire just needed help. I didn't think she would do this to you." I felt a pang of sadness, but it was laced with something harder, clarity. "You didn't want to think, Daniel. That was easier." He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time, I saw the boy I used to know, the one who used to run to me when he scraped his knees, who used to cry when life felt unfair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. But apologies, I knew, couldn't erase what had been done. I hope you mean that, I said softly, because your wife will spend years paying for what she did, and you'll spend just as long living with the fact that you let it happen. His tears fell freely then, and for a brief moment my heart ached for him. But I didn't comfort him, not this time. When he left, I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, feeling both heavier and lighter all at once. The papers were signed. My assets were protected. Claire would never see another cent from me, and when people whispered about her downfall, as they surely would, I would simply smile, offer no explanation, and let her own actions tell the story. Sometimes revenge didn't need fire. Sometimes it just needed silence, patience, and perfect timing. The family dinner invitation came a week later. Daniel texted me saying they wanted to make peace. I almost laughed. Peace. Now that Claire's accounts were frozen, her credit ruined, and her pristine image collapsing around her, suddenly they wanted peace. Still, I accepted the invitation. I arrived at their house once so full of Claire's lavish decorations, now stripped bare of many expensive items. I noticed the missing art pieces, the designer furniture replaced by cheaper alternatives. The consequences of her actions were starting to show. Claire opened the door wearing a smile so forced it almost hurt to look at. Evelyn, she said softly. Thank you for coming. Daniel hovered behind her, avoiding my eyes. At dinner, the tension was unbearable. Claire tried to steer the conversation toward trivial topics, recipes, the weather, plans for renovations that would never happen now. Finally, Daniel set down his fork and cleared his throat. Mom, we wanted to apologize for everything. We made mistakes. Claire knows she went too far. She panicked. Claire nodded quickly, eyes wide with faux remorse. I wasn't thinking straight, Evelyn. I just wanted us to have a good life. I'm so sorry. I looked at her calmly, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I appreciate your apology, I said, my voice even. But apologies don't erase consequences. You made choices. Now you're living with them. Claire's face twitched, the sweet facade cracking ever so slightly. You've ruined us, she whispered, her tone sharper now. No, Claire, I corrected gently. You ruined yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. The table went silent. I stood up, placed my napkin neatly on the table, and smiled. Dinner was lovely. Thank you for having me. As I walked to the door, Claire's voice followed me, half desperate, half furious. You'll regret this, Evelyn. I turned back and met her eyes. No, I said softly, but you will. And with that, I left, closing the door behind me. That night, as I sat in my quiet house, I realized just how much strength it took to walk away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in certainty. They wanted me to forgive and forget, but forgetting would mean letting her win, and I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. A few days after that tense dinner, Claire's world began to collapse publicly. The bank officially reclaimed the funds she had stolen, leaving her with a mountain of debt. Creditors started calling, and soon the shiny new house she was so proud of went up for sale. The neighbors, once envious of her perfect life, now whispered behind her back. Every time I passed by town, I heard bits of gossip. Did you hear what happened to Claire Marlowe? Apparently, she stole money from her own mother-in-law. She always thought she was better than everyone else. Claire thrived on appearances, on admiration. Now she couldn't even go to the grocery store without feeling the sting of judgmental stares. One afternoon, as I was leaving the library, I saw her sitting alone in her car. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman I once knew, her hair unkempt, makeup smudged, eyes hollow. For a moment, I felt an unexpected pang of pity. But it vanished quickly. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. Later that evening, Rebecca called with the final update. It's over, Evelyn. The court transferred the recovered funds back to you today. You're fully protected now. Claire's lawyer tried to negotiate for leniency, but we didn't budge. She'll be repaying the rest for years to come. Thank you, I said quietly. Do you feel satisfied? Rebecca asked. I thought for a long moment. Yes, but not because I got my money back. Because she finally faced the truth that actions have consequences, no matter how charming or clever you think you are. That weekend, Daniel called me again. His voice was quieter, less angry, more defeated. Mom, he said, I don't know how to fix this. You can't, I replied simply, but you can learn from it. There was a long silence. I don't know why I didn't stand up for you, he admitted finally. Because you didn't want to see who she really was, I said gently. And maybe you didn't want to see who you had become either. He didn't argue. For the first time in months, I heard sincerity in his voice. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't say the words he wanted to hear. I didn't say it was okay, or that I forgave him. Instead, I said, I hope you never forget this lesson, Daniel. Because I won't. As I hung up, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the dignity they had tried to strip from me. And that felt better than any victory in court ever could. Claire's downfall didn't end with the court ruling. The community she once flaunted her wealth in turned its back on her. Friends stopped returning her calls, and her social media accounts went dark after a barrage of comments exposed her betrayal. I heard whispers at the grocery store, at church, even at the hair salon. She stole from her own mother-in-law. Can you believe it? I always knew she was fake. Look where it got her. Claire couldn't hide from what she'd done. Her entire life was unraveling in plain sight. One morning, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Claire. Evelyn, I know you hate me and I deserve it. But I'm begging you, please drop the case. We're drowning. Daniel is miserable. I'm miserable. Please don't make us live like this. I read the letter twice before setting it aside. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I thought about the countless nights I'd stayed awake, terrified about my future after she stole from me. About the way Daniel had dismissed my pain, siding with her without a second thought. No. Actions had consequences. Rebecca called that afternoon. We've officially secured a lien against any future assets Claire acquires. If she tries to rebuild her wealth, a portion of it will automatically go to you until the debt is paid. I couldn't help but smile. Perfect. That evening, I walked through my quiet house. The framed photos of Daniel as a little boy still hung on the walls. They reminded me of a time when he had been mine before Claire's influence, before greed and weakness had changed him. But even as my heart ached, I knew I had made the right decision. I had spent my whole life giving my time, my love, my sacrifices, and in return, I had been betrayed. Now, finally, I had taken something back. Not just my money, my power, my dignity. And that was worth more than anything Claire could have stolen. Claire's debt quickly became a living nightmare for her. She had to sell her luxury handbags, jewelry, and even the expensive SUV she once flaunted around town. Each time I saw her driving an old beat-up sedan, I couldn't help but think this was the real price of betrayal. News of her actions spread beyond our town. People she once bragged to at social events now avoided her completely. She wasn't the glamorous wife anymore. She was the woman who stole from her own mother-in-law and got caught. Daniel called less frequently now. The last time we spoke, his voice sounded hollow, tired. Mom, he said quietly, we're losing everything. Claire doesn't sleep. She cries all the time. I don't know what to do anymore. Daniel, I replied softly, you stand by the choices you made, and you help her face the ones she made. That's all there is to do. He didn't argue. I could tell he was finally realizing what I had known all along. Claire wasn't just selfish. She was destructive. A week later, Rebecca called with another update. Claire's lawyer tried to negotiate again, she said, but the judge isn't sympathetic. Her behavior was deliberate. She's stuck with the repayment schedule we established. I thanked Rebecca, relief flooding through me again. But that night, as I sat in my living room, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't just about punishing Claire. It was about protecting myself. For so long, I had put Daniel first. I had sacrificed everything to make sure he had opportunities I never did. But now I was finally doing something for me. I made a promise to myself that night. Never again would I let anyone take advantage of me, not even my own family. Claire's debt would follow her for years. Every paycheck she earned, every purchase she tried to make, would be a reminder of the life she tried to steal from me. And I wouldn't have to lift a finger. Because the best revenge, I realized, wasn't about getting even. It was about making sure they could never forget what they did. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal, at least for me. I had my savings back, my home secured, and my dignity restored. I spent my mornings tending to my garden, my afternoons reading at the library, and my evenings enjoying the quiet peace I had fought so hard to reclaim. But for Claire, things only got worse. Word spread that she had been blacklisted from several local organizations after news of the court case. Employers hesitated to hire her, afraid of the scandal following her name. Daniel took on extra shifts to cover basic expenses, and their once luxurious lifestyle had been replaced by constant struggle. One day, Daniel came to see me. He looked exhausted, older than his years. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't expect you to forgive us, but I want you to know I'm not blind anymore. Claire's not the woman I thought she was, and I wasn't the son you deserved." His words cut through me like a knife. "You hurt me, Daniel," I said gently. "Not just because you stood by her, but because you didn't believe me. You treated me like I didn't matter." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." For a moment, I almost reached out to comfort him, but I stopped myself. This wasn't about punishing him forever, but it was about letting the weight of his choices settle in. "Daniel," I said quietly, "you'll have to earn back my trust, and that takes time." He swallowed hard and nodded. As he left that day, I felt a mix of sadness and strength. I still loved my son. Of course I did. But love didn't mean I had to be blind or that I had to sacrifice myself again. That evening, I poured myself tea and sat by the window watching the sun dip below the horizon. Claire had tried to rob me of more than just money. She had tried to rob me of my power, my self-worth. But in the end, she had only destroyed herself. And as I looked out at the quiet night, I realized something powerful. The best revenge wasn't anger. It was living well while they drowned in the mess they created. Winter came early that year, and with it a strange sense of finality. By then, Claire and Daniel had sold their dream house, downsized to a small rental on the outskirts of town, and were living a life they never imagined for themselves. Gone were the designer handbags and fancy vacations. In their place were overdue bills, secondhand furniture, and the suffocating weight of their own mistakes. One Saturday morning, I went for a walk through town. The air was crisp, the trees bare except for the last stubborn leaves clinging to their branches. As I passed the cafe near the old bookstore, I saw Claire sitting alone at an outdoor table, a chipped mug between her hands. She looked so different. Her hair tied back carelessly, her face pale and tired. Her once perfect manicure chipped down to bare nails. For a brief moment, I stopped. Part of me almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered the way she had looked at me that day. She emptied my account smug and self-satisfied, convinced she had won. Claire glanced up and saw me. Her eyes widened briefly, then quickly dropped back to her coffee. She didn't wave, didn't speak. And that more than anything told me how far she had fallen. As I continued walking, I realized how quiet my own heart felt. I didn't feel triumphant or cruel. I simply felt free. Later that afternoon, Daniel called. His voice was softer now, stripped of arrogance. "Mom," he said, we're struggling. Claire's trying to find work, but no one will hire her. People talk and they know. I just wanted you to know, I'm sorry for everything." I sat at my kitchen table looking out at the small bird feeder I'd hung outside the window. A cardinal landed there, bright red against the white snow, pecking at the seeds. "Daniel," I said quietly, "I believe you're sorry, but being sorry isn't enough. Trust isn't something you can rebuild with words. It takes time. And I don't know if you and I will ever be the same again." He didn't argue. He just whispered, "I understand," before hanging up. That evening, I met with Rebecca one last time to finalize a few remaining details. She handed me a folder containing the final court papers, proof that everything Claire had taken was returned, or would be repaid over the next several years. "This is it," Rebecca said with a small smile. "It's officially over." I ran my fingers over the folder, feeling the weight of months of pain, betrayal, and quiet perseverance. "Thank you," I said sincerely. Rebecca studied me for a moment. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Not happy exactly. Not victorious. Just whole again. "Relieved," I said finally. "I have my life back. And that's enough." That night, as I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, I realized that revenge didn't always need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes the sweetest revenge was watching the person who wronged you collapse under the weight of their own choices while you simply moved on stronger than before. And that was exactly what I intended to do. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to think about the future, traveling to places I had always dreamed of, taking up hobbies I'd abandoned, filling my life with things that brought me joy. Claire had tried to take everything from me, but she had only reminded me of something far more important. I was stronger than she ever believed, and I had finally proven it. Spring arrived, bringing with it the kind of gentle warmth that seeps into your bones and makes the world feel new again. My garden began to bloom, bright tulips, daffodils, and lilacs bursting with color. As I knelt in the soil planting new flowers, I felt something I hadn't in months: genuine peace. Life had moved on. Claire was still paying off her debt piece by piece, her once lavish world reduced to something far more ordinary. Daniel had stopped defending her blindly, though we were far from mending our bond. He called occasionally, never to ask for money, but to talk. It was a start, though. I kept my heart guarded. One afternoon, as I sipped tea on my porch, I saw Claire walking down the street. She looked thinner, her clothes worn, her shoulders slumped. For the first time, she seemed human. Not the manipulative woman who had stolen from me, but someone who had been broken by her own greed. Our eyes met briefly. She didn't speak. She didn't even try to smile. She just lowered her head and kept walking. And that was enough. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need revenge anymore. The consequences of her actions were doing far more damage than anything I could have planned. That evening, Daniel called. "Mom," he said, his voice steadier now, "I wanted to thank you. Not for what happened, because it's been hard, but for showing me who Claire really was, and who I became when I stood by her. I'm trying to be better." I listened quietly, feeling both sadness and hope. "You have a long way to go, Daniel," I said softly. "But I hope you mean it. Because if you do, maybe one day we can really be a family again." He didn't reply right away, but when he finally spoke, I could hear the sincerity in his voice. "I do mean it, Mom. I promise." After the call, I sat in silence, looking out at the golden light spilling across my garden. This wasn't a story of triumph. Not really. It was a story of survival, of taking back what was mine, and of refusing to let anyone, no matter how close, steal my worth. I thought back to the day I first saw my empty bank account, the hollow fear that had filled me. I had felt powerless, invisible. Now, months later, I knew better. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's just the quiet act of standing up and saying, "No more." Claire would carry the weight of her choices for the rest of her life. And me, I had my dignity, my savings, and most importantly, my peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was living, and that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. When I tell people my story, they often expect me to say I felt triumphant, that I relished Claire's suffering. But the truth is, revenge wasn't about watching her fall. It was about finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of putting everyone else first. I had spent decades sacrificing, working long hours as a teacher, saving every dollar, making sure Daniel had the life he deserved. I had believed that love, loyalty, and family would protect me. But betrayal teaches you something painful yet liberating: that boundaries matter even with the people you love most. Looking back, I don't regret a single step I took. Every decision I made was deliberate, quiet, and patient. I never screamed, never begged. I simply let the truth do the work for me. To anyone listening who has been betrayed by someone you love, I want you to remember this. You are not powerless. You don't need to fight with anger to reclaim your life. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay silent. Prepare carefully and let your actions speak louder than words ever could. And if my story resonated with you, I want to hear yours. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? What would you have done if you were in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Grace's Truth, and turn on notifications for more real stories of resilience and poetic justice. Because life doesn't always play fair, but sometimes just Sometimes the quietest voices win the loudest victories.